Good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Hilary Hunt and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the March 30th, 2020 webinars for educators from the Making Sense project. Today's focus is going to be on linking college and career readiness with financial education. Before we do that, I'm going to give you just a little bit of background information about the Making Sense project. And then after the conclusion of today's webinar, I'll be giving you some additional information about some other professional development opportunities, and at the very end, giving you the link and information to complete to receive your Act 48 credit if you are so inclined to submit for that. So thank you again for joining us this afternoon. It's great to have you with us. Before we keep going, or as we keep going, I guess, if you don't mind finding the chat function on your Zoom interface. We are not going to be live and don't have to worry about who can see what. You are just going to use the chat function for Q&A. But right now, if you don't mind, use that spot, select all panelists and attendees so that others that are on the line with us can see who is in the proverbial room, so to speak. And if you'll put your name, where you're from, what your role is in education, and then what your interest is in this session in particular. If you're interested because say you teach a course in personal finance, or maybe you're responsible for teaching about college and career readiness, if you could provide that over in the chat, again, to all panelists and attendees, I'd appreciate it. It'll let us know, who else is here with us and what it is that you're interested in, and I can hopefully maybe customize that just a little bit as we go. So by way of background, the Making Sense project is a partnership between the Pennsylvania Department of Education and Penn State University. It's part of an overall program or series of financial literacy and economic education initiatives. If you've never visited our website, it's makingsensepa.org. I'd encourage you to go there and look for information there as well if this is all new to you. We do have quite a few folks or names that I'm not familiar with that are joining us today. So welcome to all of you, and I hope that you'll explore more about what we offer in a variety of different areas. Our webinars that we offer throughout the school year focus on sort of three pillars. We try and enhance content knowledge on some of our webinars, highlight financial literacy resources, and finally share professional information. And it is in that sort of second and third pillars, if you will, that we're going to focus most of our time today. So great to see all of you with us. I see that we have folks from a variety of different roles, some folks that are teaching family and consumer science, career facilitator, business education teachers. We've got math and social studies, just scrolling through. We got lots of different folks on with us today. So that's wonderful. And I see a mix of high school and some middle school and others. So wonderful. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully all of you will have something that you can take away from this session. So again, we're going to do this session following what I like to call our 6 and 60 format. In some cases in the past, we've talked about, like, say, for example, 6 curriculum resources or 6 online games. In this case, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to still be sharing resources, but the way that we're breaking up this 6 and 60 is actually aligned with 6 different big ideas in personal finance. So before I talk about those a little bit more, I want to take a step forward and make sure, backwards maybe, and make sure that we're all on the same page and sort of, that you're familiar with some of the career readiness pieces that I'm talking about. So I know that those of you who are on and who are responsible for career education and work standards and the capturing of various pieces of evidence probably are very familiar with this, but some of you may not be. So just so that we're all starting from the same page, effective in 2018-19 school year and beyond, every school in Pennsylvania is required to capture pieces of evidence, and the number is given there by the benchmark. So from grades K to 5, 6 pieces of evidence, and then grades 6 through 8, and then 9 through 11. So these are pieces of evidence that must be captured and documented for each student. The evidence itself is not, submitted to the state or anything like that. The state just requires that school districts indicate whether or not it has been collected for the students. And then if when officials from the State Department of Education are in and doing, say, for example, assessment monitoring or other things like that, they can and have asked to see evidence that this is being done for students. So the career education and work standards that this is all based off of are nothing new. They've been around for quite a while. I was trying to recollect earlier. I recall actually expecting our first son, who is now 14, back in the days when these were being written, and I was sitting at the table with the folks back then. I was with the Office of Financial Education and participated on the committee that wrote these standards. So they've been around for a long time. They just now have, with the career readiness, college and career readiness indicators, I think a bit more teeth to them, in that schools are now, having to document the implementation of them. So the career education and work standards fall into 4 different categories, or 4 strands, if you will. And at each of the benchmarks, schools must be providing instruction and documenting that students have received instruction and done work in each of these 4 strands. So schools, for example, can't just focus, entirely on career awareness and forget, entrepreneurship, for example. They have to, at each of those grade bands, pay attention to all 4 of these. So before I get too much further, I believe Dr. Kevin Curry is on the line with me from Penn State. He's going to push out a link to our Making Sense PA website, where I have hosted a PDF of this document that you see here. So all of the documents that I share with you today, as well as a few others that are just supporting documents, all of those are linked in this handout. So you can grab that now, grab that later, whenever you like. The link for this will also be in the email follow-up that you get from Zoom probably tomorrow. But this will have all the links. So rest assured you'll be able to access all of this later. So back to the career education and work standards. So this is what the PDF document looks like if you were to download it from the PDE-SAS.org website, the Standards Aligned system. That tends to be my preferred way of viewing these, but there's also the vertical viewer, or you can, there's all different ways to see the standards there on SAS. But this is the document. This is what is, part of the Pennsylvania Code in Chapter 4 with regards to career education and works academic standards. And so these are the actual standards that they're mentioning. And you can see within each of those 4 strands, there's a variety of different topics, by letter. Some of them have more, some of them have a little bit less. Some of these academic standards, we see, for example, budgeting over here just kind of stands out and screams, personal finance connection, right? But maybe it's not quite as evident, perhaps, in some of these others. And so our goal today is to try and make these connections a little bit more explicit for you, so that you can see, where there are possibilities to link and or extend. I know some school districts, I've talked to some folks before that say, what can I do to teach entrepreneurship at the elementary school level? I need, some ideas or some resources. I know some folks teach courses in personal finance in high school, say, for example, and may or may not realize that the work that you're doing could be used to satisfy some of these requirements, or at the middle school level, for example. So the purpose really here is to get you start thinking about these. If you're not involved in your school's efforts to document evidence that students are meeting these career education and work standards, then I would strongly encourage you to reach out either to your administrator or your school guidance counselors or others to say, hey, I can help support these. We're doing some of these things in our classroom, and or, I'd love to be engaged in and making sure that students are getting, a really well-rounded career education and work exposure. Okay, so That's really kind of, what we're trying to do here today. So again, the standards, if you haven't downloaded these documents before, this is what it looks like. 13.1.3, 13 just means it's the 13th set of standards that were passed and put into the academic standards. So those are the career education and work. 1 refers to the strand for career education or career awareness and preparation. The number 3, 5, 8, and 11 all just correspond to the grade level benchmark, and then these letters go across horizontally, and with the intent that the information sort of builds upon each other from one grade level to the next. And you can see that they're named here. So 13.1A is abilities and aptitudes, B is personal interests, what have you. So again, for those of you who aren't familiar, maybe who have never aligned to these standards, maybe, for example, you focus on the ones for family consumer science or for BCIT, I would encourage you to make sure that you have copies of these and can also show alignment of your lessons to these standards as well. So, a number of these, as I mentioned, have some sort of explicit connections to personal finance. So, for example, here we see, salaries and benefits, potential earnings, salaries and benefits. Again, things that students might consider, as factors that they would think about when choosing a career. Here's, we talk about, education and what have you. This is the one that just sort of screams personal finance, right? So anybody who's teaching budgeting really at almost any grade level is helping to meet the career education and work standards. So then you just really have to think about how is it that you're documenting that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So with that, let's move to that sort of 6 connections in 60 minutes theme. And so the way that we're organizing today is around the 6 big ideas in personal finance education here in Pennsylvania. This all correlates to this document, which if you haven't seen it, it is linked in the handout, that we put together a number of years ago that really spans the entire grade, the pre-K to 12 grade spans. And so really at all grade levels, we can be doing things in money management, earning, borrowing, financial services, risk management, saving, and investing. And so this document just sort of helps us an organizer. Great for schools when they're thinking about, what it is that they're doing and how it aligns. I always tell folks there's a million ways to slice and dice this pie. This is just one way that we have chosen to do it. There's different national standards within financial education. They each slice these a little bit differently. When we developed these, we didn't want to endorse one over the other. So of course we kind of introduced a third option for better or worse. So anyhow, these are the 6 big ideas that we're going to focus on today. I would like to contend as well that when we think about college, careers, and employment, that really personal finance is interwoven and stretches across really all of those pieces. So let's kick off with money management, which is the first of our big ideas. So what do we talk about when we are thinking about money management? We're talking about setting goals, developing a plan for how to spend, save, and share financial resources. So with that, we're talking about spending plans and budgets. We're talking about sound financial decision-making, setting financial goals, what have you. And so those are some of the key aspects or topics that come under this big idea. So where does this fit? Well, this is the one that I was talking about earlier. This is really the most explicit of the career education and work standards correlations, right? So 13.3, career retention and advancement, letter D, has to do with budgeting. So we see here that by 5th grade, students should be able to explain budgeting. By the way, that explain how money is used in 3rd grade, at the very basic level, what does a budget look like for a 3rd grader? I contend it looks something like a save, spend, and share jar. Okay, so we're thinking about ways that money is used. We spend it, we save it, we share it, we earn it. Talking about different things that we do with money. I used to get sort of crazy when my kids were in early elementary school and they'd have math problems that says, so-and-so has $2.17. Like, come on, let's use some richer verbs. They don't just have it, they earned it, they spent it, they, received it, they gave it, what have you. But, talking about how money gets used. And then, a little bit more complicated terms of, how different ways that people budget, what different expenses individuals have, and how that should be less than or equal to their income, what the different components of a budget might be, and then certainly also, sharing with them, different strategies for budgeting. So, yeah, this is obviously a pretty strong and very explicit connection. So when it comes to budgeting, I always think, and this is one of those topics within financial education that you can get people sometimes a little up in arms over. Some people have very strong opinions about this, and it's sort of this, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? So in financial education land, this question really has to do with which comes first. Developing somebody's financial goals and a budget of how they plan to spend their money. So really it's kind of like which one comes first, income or expenses, right? Or the salary that the person anticipates earning based on the job or career that they intend to have, and then building a budget based on that. Now, if you actually go back at the 11th grade level, one of the standards here is to build or develop a personal budget based on a career choice. So that says, hey, based on this career choice of XYZ that you want to do, can you afford to do these things? Can you build a budget off of that? But you can take it from either direction, right? So I want to share with you this resource that allows you to do both. So if you're not familiar with Pennsylvania Career Zone, I would strongly encourage you to log on. This is one of just a multitude of different resources that are available there. But here you can see you can choose either one. This Choose Your Lifestyle, which really is about figuring out how much money you're going to need, or budget from a starting salary based on a career and how much that might earn. So let's take a look at budgeting how much you'll need. And this is definitely what I would recommend doing, especially with middle schoolers to start off. I think it's fascinating. I've watched my own children, for example, over the years take a number of different career inventories. It seems like every year it's something just a little bit different. Like, hey, this year I should be an engineer. Next year, oh, look, I should be an architect. Or, and this year my sons came out as an accountant. So anyhow, I think this can also be sort of eye-opening to them when maybe things aren't as nailed down in terms of what kind of salary they'll have, to take this different approach. And so what this looks like on this website, I think it's very good. It's a very good start for students. Is it allows them to first start out with where they're going to live, which my daughter's first question, because I had them do this the other day. We're home. Circumstances are a little unique right now. I said, hey kids, why don't you try this out? She's in 6th grade, and she said to me, she said, well, Mom, does this mean where I live now or where I want to live when I grow up? And I said, well, all of this should be about, when you think that you're going to be out on your own for the first time. And so all of the Pennsylvania counties are listed here, or they can do a drop-down menu and pick a county in another location. The only challenge with that is if the county, it doesn't list necessarily the city, but they can look up the zip code, for example. So if they say, hey, I want to live in Atlanta, Georgia, find the zip code for Atlanta, put it in, and it'll help them get started. So then it's a matter of what kind of a housing cost you'll have. So they make different choices. You see down here at the bottom that students are going to make each of these different unique choices. And as they do, then their new total, monthly total will come up. And so obviously each of these are going to be a different amount, and they're going to be keyed into where somebody lives, which is so important because obviously cost of living varies greatly, which again is part of somebody's financial goal, right? If you want to, live in a major metropolitan area or a place that, has a tremendous amount of growth or what have you, it's going to cost more to live there than it would, say, in a rural or suburban area, perhaps. So Again, that's where all of these things are really well connected to each other. So again, additional choices, utilities, food, entertainment, clothing, what have you, all of these decisions get made, and in the end, it develops a monthly spending amount. So in order to have this type of a lifestyle, you would need at least $4,038 a month. And then this is what that looks like right now in a pie chart form, right? You can also, if students want, add other items. So one of the reflection questions that I am going to share with you in a few minutes is, what's missing from this? So for example, a couple of 2 years ago, I sat down with my nephew who was in college, and I was visiting, and we were having dinner down in North Carolina, and he said, I really want to get a dog. What do you think about this? And he said, how much is this going to cost me? And which I was so thrilled that he was thinking about that. And so we had a conversation about what vet bills and what dog food and, all of the other things to think about might cost him, and whether or not he could afford that in his budget. So those who have pets might want to add pets or vacations or other types of things to this that they might think are missing. So they can do that. Once all of that is done, so for example, I didn't add anything here, but if they did in the other category, that's where this would pop up. It will give you a minimum annual salary. So in this case, $48,452. Is every job going to give you that minimum amount of salary? No, lots that won't. So let's look at which ones will. Okay, so students can select view occupations. And here, the salary slider has already been set to that minimum. So the minimum that they would need, and then you can see 527 occupations that meet that. Students can adjust this. So, depending on how much education they plan on having, if they have a specific career pathway that they're interested in, all of those can be done to further filter and get this list a little bit smaller. And then they can do some research about, what these different jobs are. And so, here, for example, actuaries, this is a member of the finance and insurance career pathway, what they do, what have you. So this is, this is that approach. That's starting from the budget, going to a salary and thinking, okay, what can I do? Fascinatingly enough, there was a superintendent a number of years ago who shared a story with me that they had been for years at the bottom of the rankings in their county in terms of the number of students they were sending on to any type of post-secondary education. So, not just four-year colleges, but all post-secondary ed. And they instituted a required course in personal finance. And as a part of that, students had to develop a budget based on the lifestyle that they intended to have. And I said it was such an eye-opener for so many students that they discovered that, hey, my plan, to just graduate from high school and go out into the workforce and not get any further education is not going to give me the income that I need to support the lifestyle that I'd like to live. And so he said they saw this tremendous growth in the number of students who actually ended up pursuing additional training and education beyond high school. And certainly not all four-year college degree programs, but folks that took a higher interest in the trades, higher interest in 2-year and 4-year programs as a result of that. And so, this is really, I think, where it's important to make sure that students, are not just thinking about, where do my aptitudes lie? What is it that's interesting to me? What is it that I'm passionate about? All of that is important and valuable and certainly should be considered, but can I live the lifestyle that I'm hoping to live on the amount of money that I will earn? And is that realistic for me? So that is, I think a very valuable lesson. So if you did this with students, again, you can start from the salary side, and in this case, you can drag this salary up or down. You can set the location, and then you can go through all of the different processes as well. This one I made some different choices. And you can see this came out that way as well. So this sort of subtracts as opposed to adding. So if you were to do this with students, one of the things that you can capture as evidence would be to print out a copy of this budget or save the budget, and then have students do some reflection. And so I think too often students sort of plug in numbers and do the sort of do the little pieces of some of this, but they don't take a lot of time to really reflect on it. But this is sort of an opportunity to reflect. So thinking about this, how are your answers going to change at different periods of life? What should you do if the salary requires more education than you want to obtain? Got a good question in from somebody about missing student loans. So actually that is there, and I apologize for not paying it out or pointing it out first, but yes, good point. So here education is a component of this. So one of the questions that students are asked, and I can't remember if I screenshot that one or not. It does not look like I did. It's actually one of the last questions that is asked. It's about what they anticipate having in terms of student loans. So that student loan payout is incorporated into that monthly budget at the end. So thank you for pointing that out, because that is a huge component to this, right? If they're expecting to have any debt, and the choices that they make about where they go to college and what education is required, will certainly make a big impact on their budget when they are independent. So thank you. Appreciate you asking about that. Okay, so that's actually a good segue. So let's go into earning money. So this is, of our 6 big ideas, this is the one that just screams college and career readiness, right? Like this is the one. So this is kind of like an uber obvious connection. We're talking about earning potential, developing a career plan. What do people consider when accepting a job? So before we do that, I just want to press pause for a second, and let's remind everybody that we need to make sure that we're not assuming that kids understand why people have jobs. Okay, I recall, lots of young people, lots of children, my own included. I like to pick on my own kids sometimes, but they both had these great little career day presentations. Folks came in, other moms and dads and grandmas and uncles and different folks came in and shared what they do, and all the important services that these different people provide for our in our communities, which is awesome and wonderful and a great way to show that there's lots of different occupations out there. And but at the same time, I asked my kids, I said, so why do all those people do those jobs? And they kind of look at me like, well, I don't know. And I've gone in and done classroom, guest taught in classes with elementary schools. A lot of times I get this, well, I don't know. Why do they have that job? They like doing what they do. They like people. They're a vet because they like animals, those kinds of things. And so I always like to make sure that we pause for a second and remind people that the vast majority of people, even if they love their job, probably wouldn't show up every day if there wasn't a paycheck involved, right? So there's a difference between somebody who's working in a paid position and people who are volunteers, right? Now, there's a lot of people who do fantastic things and don't earn an income for it, but the majority of the time we do work so that we can earn money. And so that is something that I just think we have to be very clear with, and sometimes isn't always explicit. And then why is it important to prepare for this stuff? We have students do all of these different types of things, but why are we asking them to do it? So don't make assumptions that kids understand this. Talk about the whys, because both of those I think are very important and not necessarily obvious to a lot of students when you do this kinds of thing. So in career awareness and preparation, there is the standard that deals with factors that students that are going to influence a person's career choice. Obviously salaries, work schedule, all of those kinds of things. The benefits, the potential earnings, all of those are very important for students to understand and then use to justify the selection of a career later on. So The resource I want to share with you is probably one that most of you have not seen before, and this has to do with using children's literature to help you support a lot of these lessons. And so we have this, there's a great tool. We developed it using, I don't know how they pronounce it. I pronounce it libib, L-I-B-I-B, and the website that we set up with our libraries is then makingsensepa.libib.com. So this has a whole host of different books that we have identified that have personal finance connections or themes. And it is divided then into 7 different libraries. So when you go in, you'll see that there's 7 different libraries over on the left-hand side. And we have one that's dedicated just to behavioral economics, because that's kind of a little bit different. Some of you might have participated last year in a book study we did that was tied to behavioral finance. That's where you'd find the book that we did, Dollars and Cents by Dan Ariely. And then we have these different ones that are really specific to financial education, books for parents, just general adult books on personal finance. Ones for nonfiction for grades K to 8, high school level books, and then picture books. And actually there's one other that is missing from that list, which is chapter books. So we have additional one with chapter books. So if you go in, you can search by the name of a book if you want, or if you want to select a specific library, you may. Or another thing that you can do is go into the tag list, where you would go in and say, hey, I'm looking for books, say, for example, on earning money or on entrepreneurship or on taxes, and see what comes up. So you can limit that just to one specific library if you want, or to all of the ones in the entire thing. So just looking at the earning money tag, I came up with 46 different results. And so, you know, these are all books that have some type of a connection or theme. Some ideas, if you wanted to use these, is, you know, why does this person or character work? Why do you think he or she selected whatever it is that they do as a career? What preparation would have been needed to do that job? You know, there's lots of different, you know, ways that you can make connections. I love some of the connections that you can do with entrepreneurship. They're great books. Some of the like Who Am I series and some of those others have some great ones on entrepreneurs. There's ones on Milton Hershey. You know, you can also connect to you know, studying the state of Pennsylvania. Some of the fictional picture books like Iggy Peck Architect, for example, and Rosie Revere Engineer. Great connections to career education and work. So just something that I wanted to throw out there as an additional idea and resource for you. So another one that I wanted to share, and this actually comes from the folks that are currently enrolled in our Making Sense book study on a book called Make Your Kid a Money Genius by Beth Kobliner. I think a number of you, I see from the list of participants, a couple of you are actively enrolled in participating in this. And so one of the prompts that we had, so when we do these book studies, we ask folks to read a couple chapters each week. And then for each chapter, we have a set of discussion prompts. So in this case, we had the chapter on jobs and careers. One of the discussion posts that we posed was develop a list of would you rather questions that relate to careers that you think your students might be interested in answering. And so as I was going through these, I thought, oh, I've got to copy and steal these and share them somehow. So I didn't steal, I asked permission of all the teachers whose questions I borrowed. And these come from folks that teach primarily at the high school level. And then I divided them into some different categories. And so we've put together an entire list of questions that you might use with students. And they're in, you know, these various different categories. One of the, you know, there's a number of different ways that you could use this in the classroom. These would make fantastic writing prompts. You could start off a class, you know, sort of as a bell ringer with one of these questions. One of the teachers said she uses questions like these with sort of a vote with your feet. So for example, education and training. Would you rather get a job that requires further education or one that does not? You know, if you answer further education, go stand on this side of the room. If you answered not, go stand on that side of the room, and then, you know, discuss the responses. I loved this one. Would you rather attend a local college for 2 years and finish at a major university, or attend all 4 years at a major university? The teacher who shared this one said the responses she got from students were very different than what she expected. She expected most of them to say they wanted to, you know, go away for 4 years. But she said, you know, she thinks that if she would have asked this, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, even in her classroom, that her responses would have been much different. So, you know, really fascinating. Another teacher created, because of this prompt, she took the ones that she wrote and she put them into a Google form and sent them out to her students and had them respond that way, so that their responses, you know, were anonymous. And then she shared the replies with the class and they talked about them. Love the different creativity. We also put these together, and the link again is in that, that document that I sent out to you, as a bingo sheet. So you can have students answer enough questions, or respond to enough of these in order to get bingo. So, you know, they could go and do 4, or they could do 5, you know, whatever they wanted to do in order to get bingo, and then they could have some choice of which prompts they respond to. So just another, you know, option. I saw the notice right before we got on this today that there's, you know, I mean, everything's constantly changing in terms of education in Pennsylvania. I don't know what you're being asked to do or what you're doing right now, but this might be an interesting thing to push out to students, something they can certainly do on their own time. Doesn't take any technology, so if you just wanted to print a copy and distribute it to students, however you're doing, you know, those kinds of things, you definitely could. There was a question about, is there a link? Yes, so in the handout there is a link to this bingo. So you can locate it there. It should give it to you on that one, I believe, as a link to the Google Doc, so that you can copy it and make it your own as well. So these questions, I think, you know, all of these tie to this, you know, this notion of different things that you might be looking at in terms of factors that influence your career choice. So, you know, having students answer these different questions, capturing some of their responses and reflections would certainly be, you know, a great thing to do. Okay, let's move to the remaining 4, which don't have quite maybe as obvious of connections, but borrowing, I'm sure you can all figure out what I'm going to talk about. And obviously it has to do mostly with student loans, right? And how much people are going to borrow you know, to pursue higher education. And so, you know, when we talk about borrowing, I always try and remember to remind everybody, you know, the goal here is to talk about how borrowing has costs and benefits. You know, in general, investment in education pays off if done wisely and responsibly. And so, you know, I love the notion, you know, borrow to owe versus borrow to grow. Traditionally, student loans are a way to borrow to grow, right? Because it's an investment in yourself. Certainly, the need to, you know, talk about how this, you know, has both potential costs and potential benefits, and you can tie it into all of these things, right? So if you borrow more than you need, that could impact your credit worthiness down the road as well. So lots of different connections that are possible here. So the resource that I want to show, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this game or interactive. It's called Payback from Next Gen Personal Finance, or NGPF, and it simulates college living and financing decisions. And this is a fun one for students to play. So they go through, and at the very beginning, they're answering questions based on basically their senior year in high school. You know, what's their GPA, their extracurriculars, where do they live? These are the selections that I made in this case, and it gives you some choices about where you might pursue education. You select one of those, and then you continue to go on. There's some questions before you even start college, and then questions, you know, as you're getting ready to leave, and then you start your freshman year. And with each year, as you progress through the game, you're asked different questions, and as you do, these different categories all change. So you might be doing really well on focus, but maybe your connections one goes up or down. Same thing with your happiness. So if the only thing that you select is work, 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 earn, then your happiness is probably going to go down, and so that'll get reflected in here as well. And then finally, how much student loans, how much money have you racked up in student loans? And again, it's just a simulation, but I think it really gets students to start thinking about, the choices that they make, not just up front, but as they go along all throughout their college experience. All of these are interconnected. And so again, sophomore year, choosing a major, which will come into play down the road. Their junior year, additional questions, things that they want to go through. I was one of the lucky ones when I went through this. I made it to graduation. Not every student makes it to graduation because of the choices that they make. In this case, I quote unquote won because the choices that I made led to an overall student loan debt that was less than my anticipated starting salary. Or on a monthly basis, here's what that would look like. So on a monthly basis, the amount that would come out for my loan payment, and $473 as a total, out of the total of about $2,700. And then you can play it again. You can share your results. And GPF offers this fantastic worksheet and component that goes with this for students. This is great because they encourage students to play at least 2 rounds, and capture some of their decisions that they make. And then at the end, they're going to reflect on this. And so they offer 10 different questions in this about, to sort of think critically about their responses. I see a comment coming in from Elaine. Thank you. I've played this with my classes a number of times. One of the best features is that it can be very different every time it is played. Great student responses. Yes. I love playing this one in a room full of teachers when teachers make poor decisions and end up not making it to graduation too. It's great. And certainly something, I think if you play this in a classroom with everybody playing it at the same time, there's sort of an interesting and neat buzz. But this is also something that, say, for example, if you're trying to push out remote learning right now, you could send this out and have students reflect on their experience, what have you. So yes, I think this is just a fantastic simulation that NGPF put together, and just one of many that they have. I encourage you, if you haven't looked at the stuff that they offer, to definitely do that. Okay, so now for some of the ones that maybe are a little less obvious, the financial institutions piece. You might be saying, well, Hilary, what in the world does that have to do with teaching about college careers? I'd argue that there's some pretty good connections. So when we look at financial institutions, we're talking about, how do people choose and use financial services, and what do they do to safeguard their financial assets and information? So this is probably a pretty easy question, but 82% of employees receive their paycheck via, what do you think? A, B, C, or D? Put your answer over there in the chat. Let's see if everybody's awake. What do you think? 82% of employees receive their paycheck via A, B, or C. Yep, lots of B's. Good job. I appreciate knowing that you're awake. Thank you. It's always a good one. All right, so yes, 82% of people receive their check or their paycheck via direct deposit. And so what does one need in general to receive direct deposit? A bank account. Okay, so this again comes from NGPF. These are some follow-ups to this question of the day. That you could pose to students about this. But I want to ask you for a second. So when do you guys think we should start teaching about this? And so I posed 2 questions for you here. So do me a favor, answer again with 2 numbers, because they're not the same. That'll be my first hint to you. At what age do most banks, and I should probably say credit unions, allow children to open a checking account? And at what age can children in Pennsylvania obtain a work permit? So this is a checking account, not a savings account. Those two are different and they have different rules with most banks. So savings accounts you can open for your kids, before they can walk and talk. But a checking account, how old do they have to be? And how about for the work permit? All right, we got a bunch of folks with question marks. Good. All right, so the answer for this is actually 13 and 14. So believe it or not, if you haven't been out with a young person recently, most banks nowadays will allow children to open a checking account at the age of 13. And this means that they can start to have money deposited into a checking account at the time that they start working, which can be as young as 14 years old. So yes, you can do direct deposit into savings accounts, but most kids by the time they start earning money would like to have it go into something that they might be able to use a little bit more easily. And so I would argue that we want to start teaching about this, early enough that students, can sort of go hand in hand. And yes, great question, Sharon. Isn't checking with parents at that age? Yes, all financial institution accounts up until the age of 18, because they're not able to sign for themselves as a legal adult until the age of 18. All of these are, being signed with a parent or guardian. But you can't get a checking account. I've yet to find a financial institution that will give a checking account to, to a 10-year-old. My daughter right now is very miffed by this, by the way, because my 14-year-old son has a checking account. He got a debit card that he can use as opposed to taking cash with him, when we go to a store and purchase things. She is very upset that she does not have one yet. She's got another 2 years to wait until she can do that. So, those are different, and some banks do still make students wait. So you want to check around all of the financial institutions that we do business with and have accounts with. Though it's all 13, and there are others that are online that also will allow it at 13. So another question a lot of times comes up is, well, can't the parents just teach this? And in theory, yeah, parents should be teaching this. They should be responsible for going into a financial institution with their kid and opening up their first savings account and their first checking account. But the reality is a lot of them don't. And in some cases, some of them can't. And so I just wanted to point out, if you're not familiar with some of these statistics, not all parents are what we like to call banked. So when we talk about individuals who are unbanked, okay, in this map that you're seeing, the darker the state, the higher the percent or the rate of individuals is. Unbanked means the individual does not have an account such as a checking or a savings account. They don't have an account with a traditional mainstream depository institution, i.e. a bank or a credit union, okay? And then there's a whole nother group of folks that fall into what we call the underbanked. Well, what in the world is the underbanked, you might ask? Well, the underbanked are individuals who have an account, but who, and this is defined as those who have an account, but in the past year have also used a non-traditional or alternative financial service, say, for example, like a check casher or a payday lender. And so here in Pennsylvania, our rate of individuals, adults who are unbanked, is a little lower than the US average, but our rate of underbanked individuals is actually higher. And this can be as a result of lots of different things. If you live in an urban area where there are no bank or credit union physical locations, that can be a challenge. Maybe the check casher down the street is really easy to access and friendly and what have you, and you have to get downtown or somewhere else to get to a local branch of a bank or a credit union. Maybe you've bounced so many checks because of some poor choices in the past that you're now in what's called check systems. And if you walk into a bank and they run your information through there, which they do for everybody who wants to run an account, you just don't realize it. If they find out that you have a reputation for bouncing checks because your information is in check systems, well, you're probably not going to be able to open an account, or you might have to pay a lot of money to do it, in fees and what have you. So there's lots of reasons. Some people might live in a rural area where it's just not, easy to access, or perhaps there's some cultural mistrust, or, other things. There's all sorts of different reasons, but don't make the assumption, again, that all parents are banked, or that all parents have the ability or are going to have these conversations with their students. So there are some great resources for this. There's some traditional lesson plans, point out the ones from the Council for Economic Education, from their Financial Fitness for Life. There's some great activities from Next Gen Personal Finance. And there's a module, I'm going to show you this one as well here in a second. This is a self-paced module that students can go through called Deciding Where and How to Bank. So this is free, and students don't need to log in or anything. You can push this out with just a link. And students, there's a little pretest, they can watch a video, they find out information, say, for example, about common banking services, things about like different fees, what have you. All right, let's move on to risk management. I'm watching my time. I think I can do these last two. Okay, let's go fast. All right, so when we talk about risk management, it's about limiting their risk. We can also talk about accepting risk, transferring risk, avoiding risk, but lots of different things around risk, protecting individuals from loss, and how does insurance work. So the big connection that I'd like to point out between this and career, college and career readiness is really about how people choose to work. So if you think about your parents or your grandparents, almost all of them, if they went to work, were a traditional employee. They went to work, they got a paycheck, their taxes were taken out and sent to the government, the employer matched their tax contributions, or some of their Social Security and what have you. They were traditional employees. Nowadays, we have lots more independent contractors, whether that's their full-time job, or this whole gig economy. And every Uber driver, for example, they're an independent contractor. They're not employed by Uber. Lots of individuals actually are surprisingly independent contractors that you may not realize. When the hair salons and barbershops start opening up again, ask if you're friendly with them, ask them if they're a 1099 independent contractor or their employee. Your answer might surprise you. So you find folks that work as independent contractors in lots of different roles. And then there's entrepreneurs, which is its own whole strand in the standards. Entrepreneurs open a business, set up shop, usually employ other individuals. And as a business owner, there's sort of different differences there. Yes, you can be an entrepreneur and an independent contractor. I'm not going to get into the nuance there, but let's just take a look, for example, about some of the things here with risk. So there's risk with your pay. How much will it be? What's the timing of it going to be like? Is it going to be reliable? So, for example, I work as an independent contractor. I traditionally don't get paid until the job is done. I don't get money up front. I don't necessarily get money every 2 weeks or every month. It depends on the jobs that I'm doing. And when will that come? And independent contractors are very easy to let go. As sometimes, they don't have the protections of unions and what have you. What about your time? Can you afford to not be able to have paid time off for vacations, for illness? You get sick as an independent contractor, for example, and you might just be out of luck. There's no paid time off with that. What about insurance? Who's going to cover your health, dental, vision, disability, workers' compensation, unemployment compensation? For the first time ever, I think, because of the federal legislation that looks like it's passing possibly today. I don't know. Haven't checked the news today, but for the first time ever, it's looking like independent contractors may be able to apply for unemployment compensation. That's never been allowed before. Only traditional employees. So again, this ties in very nicely with the career awareness and preparation components, as well as the entrepreneurship pieces. I just want to give a little plug to a session that we have coming up in May. This is the game Can't Stop. If you can, find your little raise your hand feature on the webinar and use that. Click the raise your hand if you've ever seen this game before. So this game is called Can't Stop, and it is actually a family favorite in our house. It is probably not a very familiar one, but we're going to talk about it on the webinar in May. And you don't have to buy the game itself. There's actually some online versions of it that we're going to share. But if you're stuck at home and you're bored right now and you want a new game to try out for family game night, this is kind of a fun one. It's about like $34, I think, last I checked on Amazon, so it's not incredibly inexpensive, but it's a fun one. So anyhow, it's a little teaser for May 11th. Okay, saving and investing, last but not least. One of the first things you have to do, I don't know about you guys, I'm going to lower everybody's hands for a minute. Now, how many of you, raise your hand if the first day that you went to work, you felt comfortable, first day on the job, like your first real job, did you feel comfortable asking questions about things like your retirement plan? Will the company match it? How much can you contribute? What were the tax implications? Raise your hand if your first time out in the work world, you felt comfortable asking these questions. Crickets, crickets, crickets. I don't see anybody raising their hand. Yeah, because most of us weren't, right? We didn't get this type of an education in advance. So this is very much tied to college and career readiness, right? Are our kids going to be ready the first time that they show up and meet with the HR director or their boss to ask these questions? So this is, again, a very strong connection between saving and investing and college and careers. So a couple of good resources that are linked on the handout. This is a video on compound interest from the Council on Economic Education. There's actually a lesson that links to this video, as well as a Kahoot, which is great to help see if students understood what you were getting across in that video. These are all from the PBS series 2 Cents. Now I will add my 2 cents to this. These videos are not created for high school students. These are created for like a millennial audience. So you must watch each one of them before you push them out. I mean, is there, there just may be some of these I just wouldn't want students necessarily doing that. Like there's a whole one on like investing in marijuana and stuff like that. So, make sure that you preview all of these before you do them. But lots of ones on investing topics, and these are really well done. They're fun, they're engaging. I enjoy watching them. I think your students will too. And they're all relatively short. So, I made it. All right, got 3 minutes to spare. So that's going to conclude our linkages, our explicit linkages and resources on the college and career readiness and being linked with financial education. So if you've got any questions that you still want me to answer, feel free to post those over in the chat. But I'm going to move on to a few upcoming events and resources that I want to share with all of you really quick. So we have 2 more of our already set in stone webinars. These were set up well before any of us knew what COVID-19 was. So we have 2 more of these coming up, April 6th on the status of personal finance education in Pennsylvania high schools, and then May 11th, that one I was talking about earlier on using games. So I hope that you can join us. Oh, we had a question. Will we have access to this PowerPoint? Great question. So I always post the PowerPoint after all of them are done, and they will be available in our archive of our webinars online. So makingsensepa.org, go up to the Learn tab, and you'll see after our upcoming webinars, our archive of webinars. And so there you're going to find links to documents, links to the presentation as a PDF, and once I get it uploaded onto YouTube, you'll find a link to the YouTube video as well. You're always welcome to watch any of our archived webinars. Unfortunately, we can't offer Act 48 at this point for those. But if you think somebody that you know would benefit as well from watching a recorded version of this, feel free to send them those links. Or we still have another session coming up today at 7 o'clock if you want to let folks know that maybe they'd be interested in participating today. The other thing that we're looking at doing is providing some office hours, and this is, again, all sort of subject to change depending on what's going on with education right now and what have you, but a lot of schools are looking at their continuity of education planning process. Some teachers have been pushing out things sort of as optional extension activities. Others are, keep it on, keep it on. I know that looks different for everybody. but we're going to be making some resources available. The high school document is just about done. And I'm hoping to be able to do some office hour kinds of things like Zoom meetings where you can join in and we can just have a conversation if you're looking for things and looking for support or ideas. I can certainly, we'll try and be of assistance as much as I possibly can. I know that I mentioned NGPF as some of the resource providers earlier, but they have done such a fantastic job responding to things going on. They've got a wonderful team that just, sort of dropped everything they were doing, and they put out a fantastic virtual PD series on teaching remotely. Kevin just put out a link to that. They are doing, these are sessions they're doing just today and tomorrow. So yes, Sharon said today at 4 and tonight also. Yeah, they are doing, a ton of these sessions. I've participated in a couple of these. We've also been doing sessions with Tim and the team at NGPF, with other folks across the state that are trying to lead financial literacy efforts, and they're really good. So again, then these are ones coming up later in the year. In particular, if you teach at the middle school level, which I see some of the names, I know you guys are doing that. They're releasing their middle school program on the 2nd of April. So you definitely want to carve out time to be on that or, look at this. I'm curious too. I think I might try and hop on this one with Tim that Tim's doing on personal finance in the age of pandemic. So lots of great resources there. We're trying not to duplicate things, although we have had some conversations with them about maybe doing some PD just for PA teachers so that we can offer Act 48 credit. They do offer it for their fin camps through the Allegheny IU, but not for all the one-offs, the 1 hours. So if there's a particular session that you would love for Next Gen to do and get Act 48 credit, let me know, and they're more than happy to partner with us if we can figure out the logistics and make that work. So again, you can go to their website or just go to their main page, go up to Teacher PD and select the online PD option. Whew, all right, I think I made it. I went 1 minute over, so close. All right, well, thank you all for participating with us today. I know you have lots of choices about what you could be doing with your time, maybe not quite as many choices today about where you can be, but I'm glad that you chose to spend your time with us today.